Hey, what's up everybody, Mega Players here. In today's video I want to talk about 5 tips that you should probably do at the start of a Dead by Daylight match. Now, the beginning of a match in this game can make such a huge difference to how the outcome is going to turn out to be. So I'm going to be listing 5 tips that you should probably do that can make your life a bit more easier during your matches. So here are the tips. Number 1, before hopping on a generator, I recommend crouching around where you spawn and look for who the killer might be. Because if you hop on a generator and it's a stealth killer, you're just probably going to get grabbed if you're not paying attention. Which you should be, but I recommend doing this either way. So that you know who the killer is going to be, what perks they might have. Because they might have corrupt, and if you just run straight to a generator, you might get cut off or something and then go down. So it's best to just wait and see what the killer might have, who the killer is, and see who your teammates are, where your teammates are, where the gens are placed, and where the loops are chased. This second tip kind of applies to like the other tips. But yeah, just crouch where you are for like 30 seconds, a little bit, and kind of look around. This might help you, plan out something and just live a bit longer. Alright, tip number 2, which gens you should be doing first. Now, if you didn't know, there are 7 generators on every map, but you only need to do 5. Now, there's something that can easily happen and that can easily hurt your team, is 3-genning yourself. Now, what this means is the last 3 generators are super close to each other. Now, this is a really bad thing that can happen to you and your team, because if the last 3 generators are like really close to each other, the killer only needs to walk a short distance to each gen. This means it makes it easier for the killer just to defend each generator and to spot the survivors. Now you can counter this by simply splitting up with your team. If there's still 4 people alive, just split up, do the generators little by little, and then eventually it'll get done. But to prevent this from happening, don't do the corner gens first. Do the middle generators first. If you do the middle ones first, then that just leaves the corner generators last. That means they'll be more spread out, and especially on a bigger map, they'll just be really far away, and the killer will they can't really defend it at all, unless they're like a mobile killer. But even then, it's a little bit hard for them. So yeah, I recommend just doing the middle generators first. Now, the only middle generator that you should not do first is the main building one, which is usually like in around the big building or inside the main building. The reason for this is most of the time those gens are really hard for killers to defend. For example, like in Myra's house, is inside the house. In Dead Dog, that one's really hard. So I recommend doing those first, because it's harder for the killers to kind of like get inside. Not really hard, but it makes it slightly harder. So try to do that one, like save that one for last 2, and just do the ones around the middle. That should prevent you from getting 3-gen. Alright, tip number 3. Use your camera to spot totems. Now, these totems are like skulls that are kind of in tight little spots that I recommend you cleanse and also memorize, because in future games these things will become much stronger and more common to go against. But you should be cleansing these, especially if they're lit up, because killers might have a perk like Ruin, Devour, or Hex on Dying. So be sure to cleanse these, especially if they're dull, because they might have NOED at the end of the game, which you'll be able to go down in one hit, which is not good. So I recommend you look around, pay attention to these, see if the killer has it, and just memorize these spots, because later on a lot of killers are going to bring these. So yeah, be sure you're looking out for these. Alright, tip number 4, keep track of how many resources that you have on the map to use later. Now, as you know, survivors only have like 2 types of ways to defend themselves: loops and pallets. Now, most maps, they don't spawn the same amount of pallets every game. Sometimes they spawn in different spots, sometimes it spawns more, sometimes it spawns less. Sometimes they can spawn super close to each other. So when the match starts, kind of pay attention to how these loops are structured and how they're placed. This can give you an idea of how you should play each loop, if you should greet it or not, if you can spare pallets or not, and just pay attention, and it can give you a good idea of how you should run each loop and if they connect or not. Alright, and tip number 5, checking for early game perks or killer sound effects. Now, some early game perks that you should check for is corrupt. If you see the generator is blocked, that means they have corrupt, and the killer is probably at the other side of the map, because it blocks the farthest generators from the killer for 2 minutes. So keep that in mind. Ruin, if you go on a generator and let go and you see sparks, they have Ruin. If they have Undying, you'll know if you go next to a Dole totem and on the top right it'll say Hex Undying. That means they have it and they see your aura, so kind of be careful if the killer comes near you. If at the start of the game the killer comes straight for you and like it feels like they're hacking, they might have Lethal Pursuer and they see your aura at the beginning of the match. Now, sound effects you should kind of pay attention for that can be really useful is chainsaw sound effects. The two killers that have that are Billy and Bubba. They sound kind of different, but I don't know how to explain it, but you'll know once you play the game long enough. You can search up the sound effects. They do sound slightly different. Spirit, when she's phasing, if she's phasing around you, you'll hear like a whoosh sound, kind of. Not whoosh sound, I don't know how to describe it, but you hear like a certain sound. Wraith, you'll definitely hear the whoosh sound. Wraith is like a whoosh sound. Nurse, you'll screech when she uses her power early. Deathslinger, you'll hear a gunshot. Pinhead, you'll see like the HUD will look kind of different. Same with Freddy as well. Doctor, sometimes there'll be like little spark things on the HUD characters, or he'll just use his power right away. Some killers have different terror radius, like Clown and Deathslinger, so kind of pay attention to that. Also Pyramid Head. So if you try to memorize and pay attention to these sounds, it'll let you know who the killer is, and you can practice learning them, and then when you go against them, you kind of know what to do for the next game. So kind of pay attention to that. So yeah, those are my 5 tips for beginners to do at the start of the match. If you found this video useful, leave a like, and if you enjoyed it and want more, subscribe. Peace out.